This solemn occasion is a time for reflection, remembrance, and a reaffirmation of a commitment to ensure that such horrors never happen again. However, since the Holocaust, we have witnessed and continue to witness horrendous conflicts and genocides across the globe. These wars remind us of the continuous need for vigilance and the high cost of peace. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, a poignant reminder of the atrocities committed and the resilience of those who survived. The Holocaust was a period of unimaginable suffering and loss. 6 million Jews, along with countless others, including Roma, disabled individuals, political dissidents, and LGBT plus persons, were systematically persecuted and murdered by the Nazi regime. The sheer scale of this tragedy is almost beyond comprehension, yet it is our duty to remember each and every victim as an individual with hopes, dreams, and loved ones. As we stand here today, we are reminded of the resilience and strength of the human spirit. We honor the survivors who, despite enduring such horrors, have shared their stories and kept the memories of those who lost alive. Their courage and determination inspire us to fight against hatred, bigotry, intolerance in all its forms. This year's theme, For a Better Future, calls on us to take action to create a world free from prejudice and hatred. We must speak up against Holocaust and genocide, denial, challenge discrimination, and encourage others to learn about the Holocaust and recent genocides. By doing so, we honor the memory of the victims and work towards a future where such atrocities are never repeated. In Surrey, we are committed to fostering a community that values diversity, inclusion, and respect for all. We must remain vigilant and proactive in combating anti-Semitism and all forms of discrimination. It is our collective responsibility to create a society where everyone feels safe, valued, and respected. I now invite Councillor Paul Deach to share his memories and thoughts with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honoured guests, Mr. Chairman, friends, colleagues, members of our community. We gather today to remember the millions of innocent lives extinguished by the dark hand of hatred during the Holocaust. We remember the mothers, fathers, children, and entire families torn apart and systematically murdered on an industrial scale. We remember the communities shattered, the cultures decimated, and the futures stolen. As a Jewish Surrey councillor, the Holocaust holds a particularly poignant meaning for me. It's a stark reminder of the depths of human depravity, but also a testament to the resilience and courage of the human spirit. Growing up in a vibrant Jewish community in Manchester, I was fortunate to have personally known many Holocaust survivors. I remember as a child listening with wide-eyed wonder to their stories of abject hardship, loss, and fear. One survivor, Mayer Hirsch, MBE, lived next door to my uncle. He and his brother Jacob survived Auschwitz, but his mother, father, and 3 other siblings did not survive. When we were children, my twin brother and I would deluge him with endless questions whenever we saw him in the street, eager to understand how he endured the horrors of the concentration camp. He always answered with grace and patience, never showing a hint of anger or bitterness. He dedicated his life to Holocaust education, embodying the mantra, we must never forget. My childhood hero, Mayer Hirsch, was awarded an MBE for services to Holocaust education in 2013. He died at the age of 90 in 2016. Mayer's unwavering commitment to Holocaust education and remembrance, along with stories of other survivors, instilled in me a deep sense of responsibility. A responsibility to ensure the lessons of the Holocaust are never forgotten, that the victims are never forgotten, and that such atrocities are never repeated. Another notable Holocaust survivor was a member of our community Hebrew congregation, was Pinky Kurdnitz, born in Poland, Pinky endured the Holocaust in a number of concentration camps. His parents and siblings all perished in Treblinka. In 1945, after his liberation, he was taken to the Lake District aboard a Lancaster bomber. He was one of a group of 732 Holocaust survivors who ended up in the Lake District, who became simply known as the Boys, even though around 200 of their number were in fact girls. Pinky settled in my community in Manchester and was a member of our shul. He donated a sefer to our shul, which my twin brother and I had the honour to read our bar mitzvahs from. Pinky died in Israel in 2017, aged 90. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to visit Auschwitz-Birkenau. Walking through those infamous gates, I felt a chill run down my spine. The sheer scale of the camp, the material proofs of crimes exhibition, with its mountains of children's shoes, the gallows, the gas chambers, and of course the crematoria. It was all overwhelmingly chilling. Standing in Birkenau, I tried to imagine the terror and despair of those who arrived on cattle trucks, crammed together, starved and dehumanized. I tried to imagine the trauma of families being torn apart, knowing they would most likely see each other again. They would never see each other again, I beg your pardon. The experience was profoundly moving and left an indelible mark on my soul. The Holocaust was a dark chapter in human history, a stain on our collective conscience. We must forever remember the victims, honour the survivors, and learn from the past. We must stand united against hatred, prejudice, and discrimination in all of its forms. We must also remember that the Holocaust did not begin with gas chambers. It began with words, words of hate, words of intolerance, words that dehumanized and demonized an entire people. We must be vigilant against such words, for they are the seeds of violence and destruction. Today, as we remember the victims of the Holocaust, let us also recommit ourselves to building a better future, a future where diversity is celebrated, where empathy and compassion prevail, and where the lessons of the past guide us towards a world free from hatred and intolerance. Let us remember, let us learn, and let us act. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Now I invite Holocaust survivor Ted Truscoe to share his memories.
Not really my memories, because certainly, as you know, today is an 80th celebration, as it were, the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau. And I not long ago celebrated my own 80th birthday, so I was very young. In fact, probably one of the last remaining, the youngest ones, and when I go, the memories will go unless you keep them up. I'm not Jewish, nor my family, Polish Catholics, in fact. I was born in Warsaw in 1944, and 3 months after I was born, the Warsaw Uprising broke out, where the population of the city battled the Germans for 70 days, unsuccessfully in the end, for all sorts of reasons. And the particular zone where my mother was fighting was one of the first, as it were, to fall to the SS when they counterattacked. And for 3 days, they went on a total rampage, killing everything. But at some point, some German general became embarrassed by this and ordered that women and children were to be spared. So fortunately, where my mother was, it was on the 4th that Ukrainian SS, as it happens, came along, so we were taken prisoner rather than killed on the spot. Hitler was appalled at the Warsaw Uprising and ordered the entire city be destroyed, and that the population should be sent off to wherever it was they'd be sent off. But the place they started off was a transit camp, Cllr 121 in Truscoe, where eventually 400,000 citizens of Warsaw were evacuated and assessed and sent off to their various locations, which is where I come in. My mother was burdened with 2 small children. My sister was 4 years old, and me, who was 4 months old, and carted around in a large laundry basket. All the other partisans called me Moses, so I do have some connection to. Obviously, the Gulag 121 couldn't accommodate 400,000 people, so there were regular transports out there, many of them to Nordhausen, where the infamous Dora concentration camp was. And of course, there were the other people, which I observe the useless mouths, of whom I'll say something in a moment. So people really at risk most of all were very small children and their parents. So it came about that on one day, 7th of August 1944, we were being lined up to go onto the train. People were marched along in rows of 4. That way you couldn't really just break away and try and hide, because people would, guards would notice that there were only 3 in that group or something like that. And as it happens at the time, there was an epidemic of typhus within the camp, which was very common for camps, and a disease of which the Germans were mortally afraid, with some justice actually. So they preferred not to deal with the typhus victims themselves at all. So as we're being led to get onto this train, there was one Polish doctor who had been given a sort of brief to sort of pick out any medical personnel. As it happens, this particular doctor worked in the same university that my mother had taught in. And she saw it and said, "I need her, she's a nurse." And said very authoritatively in perfect German. So my mother was pulled out, and with my mother, my sister, and I, and our nurse, were pulled out as well, so an entire 4 vanished. So there wasn't a gap, because people in the queue going onto the train shuffled forward and backward. So that, oh my life, certainly those 8 people who I will never know. Because of course that train was headed for the centre where people were assessed, namely Auschwitz. There were a couple of thousand on that train. I've seen some of the records. And among them were round about 1,200 children. Fewer than about 120 survived, mainly teenage boys who were assessed as able to work in the factories at Birkenau. But I survived because of a deadly disease. One was actually safer in the typhus hospital than getting on that train, because small children were clearly of no use to the Reich whatsoever. So they went straight in the gas chambers without any record or anything. So that way we eventually survived within the camp, and before long the Russians, who'd been sort of camped the other side of the Wisła, started to move, and the Germans evacuated at high speed, including the commandant of Gulag 121, who went on to transit camps in what nowadays is Czechia, and committed fairly awful crimes, which eventually he was sentenced. And the Czechs hanged him. And I'm not in favour of capital punishment generally, but I find it hard to condemn that. So that's how I came actually still to be alive at the end of it. and the odds were really against it. I don't like the word miracle, because, well, the other 1,000 or so children who went on that train didn't have a miracle. So I do feel obliged, as it were, to tell the story and keep things alive. It's worthwhile, really, if I may, Chairman, talk of two other things. First of all, how much of the Holocaust there was. We remember Auschwitz, but in some way it's become the star turn. There are so many other places and so many other peoples who suffered in there. So I'd like to mention one man who history really has passed by a bit and deserves to be remembered. A man called Herbert Bacher, Obergruppenführer Herbert Bacher, who was Reich Minister of Agriculture. And in 1941, the year before the famous Wannsee Conference, which decided on the final solution, so-called, Herbert Bacher held his own conference, where they formulated what they called the hunger plan. The idea there was to, well, basically, starve, and he put a figure on it. 30 million people need to go. And they actually started doing it. And see, my own grandmother died for starvation because all the harvests were taken up, the dry goods sent to Germany, the meat and dairy things were there to feed the German army. It's a little known element of things, and I think that deserves to be remembered. The millions of villagers who were just slaughtered unrecorded. How many people died in the Holocaust? Well, we know 6 million Jews. There were figures disputed somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 million non-Jewish Poles. Also died in the camps. Unknown numbers of Russians. The gypsy community almost wiped out. So it is right that we remember it. And thank you very much for the people putting on the exhibition. It took me a lot of work for many years, indeed a couple of decades, actually to get Holocaust Memorial Day recognised in Surrey. Originally, the then chairman told me, well, we've got Remembrance Sunday. And it took me a long time that people began to understand that these were really quite different occasions. People ought to know, and it was interesting because the fact that you're here means that you actually have a greater interest. I've been showing one or two people things about the National Holocaust Memorial Centre and Museum. Hands up anyone I've not spoken to who knows where it is. Says it all really, doesn't it, Rabbi?
Worth a visit.
Long ago, a couple of Christians were visiting Israel, and they went to Yad Vashem, and they thought, why is there nowhere commemorating this in England? The Smith family. And they devoted their own house originally to create a museum. That's gradually expanded into the National Holocaust Memorial and Museum. And it is in
Nottinghamshire.
In Nottinghamshire, Newark-on-Trent. And asked them there, why is it that this Holocaust Museum is in Europe, which most people have never heard of? They said, because no one else was interested. So it's, I urge you to support the National Museum in Newark, marvellous work they do, but they deserve to be much better known. And the last thing I'd like to mention is, when did the Holocaust end? There was one time in the late 60s, I was with a group of Poles who'd been doing a dancing display. And in between shows, we were sort of crammed into a hotel room and all talking. There were 16 of us. I was the only one who'd never attempted suicide. And I talked to other people. Certainly one reason I was talking to the Holocaust Museum was, how many generations does it take before the Holocaust carries on killing people? Because it still is. Keep things alive and somehow try to preserve the lives of our own children and grandchildren who suffer from the crippling disease of survivor guilt. I say we all have it. I certainly have it. But thank you so much for coming here today, and thank you very much for Surrey County Council for enabling it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
We now wanted to have Rabbi Alex Goldberg to lead us all in the lighting of the candles of remembrance today and to read the interfaith prayer.
Thank you, Sarge. Before I light a candle, I'm a Surrey native, and we're going to say a prayer to remember the dead because there's no one to say the prayers for them. There are no children or grandchildren. But I always at these occasions now remind people of Surrey as a place of refuge. 3 schools full of Jewish children from the Cllr transport were established here. A hostel in Cobham established by, we heard last week, the Bishop of Guildford's grandmother. And in Guildford itself, Woking had DP camps, and a very famous rabbi here, if you've been to Berlin and seen the Oranienburger Strauser Shul, the beautiful onion dome shul, the chief rabbi of that synagogue found his last days in Woking. But in Guildford, we had musicians and people from literature and the arts, and they formed the International Club. They made Guildford a little bit cool for a while, so thank you. I'm going to light this candle and then say El Melech Rachamin, in English version and in Hebrew. There we go. Melech Rachamin, Shochem Baramim, Hametzeh Hamanucha Nochana Al Kanafeh HaShachina, Bamalot Kodashim, V'Taharim Kasacha, Harakia Hamisirim Et Nishmad, Acheinu B'nei Yisrael HaKadashim, V'Tahavrim, V'Acharei HaKadashim, Sheniflu B'dei Haratzichim, V'Nishbach Damam, V'Auschwitz, V'Denek, Treblinka, Uvishia Menuchavot, Hasamet, V'Yerupa, Shana Hagu, Shana Hashatu, V'Shanis Rafu, V'Nashadabu, V'Shana Hanaku, Al HaKadosh Hashem, V'Voshakok HaKol HaKadosh Hazeh, Mitfalim Ba'ad HaZachra Nishmod, B'gan Eden Tehi Menuchata, Lechem Ba'al Harachamin, Yatzirem B'Seteh, Kanafecha Li'olamim, V'Sora, V'Kusora, Hayim, Et Nishmatam, Adonai hu niflatam v'nevlachnachu al mishkavatam v'shalom v'nema amen. O God, who is full of compassion, who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest in thy divine presence to all thy souls of holy and pure brethren, of Jew and Gentile, whose blood was spilled by the murderers in Auschwitz, Belzec, Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, Majdanek, Sobibor, Treblinka, other extermination camps, and in the fields of Europe, who were killed, strangled, burned and buried alive for the sanctification of your name. For those souls we now pray, may their resting peace be together in the Garden of Eden. May the Master of Mercy shelter them in the shadow of his wings for eternity. May he bind their souls the bond of life. Hashem is their heritage. And may they repose in peace in their resting place. Let us say never again. Now let us say Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all for joining us today. We will very soon be reaching a time where there are no Holocaust survivors left. So now, more than ever, it is crucial that we keep their stories alive, ensure that the devastating acts of genocide the Jews experienced are never forgotten. We're also incredibly grateful to Paul and Ted for their deeply personal and moving contributions. Your words help us to remember, reflect and renew our commitment to building a better future. And thank you to Rabbi Alex Goldberg for lighting the candle of remembrance today. Let us pledge to honor the memory of victims by promoting peace, understanding and compassion in our daily lives. Let us stand together against hatred and work towards a future where such events are never repeated. Thank you all for joining us in this important act of remembrance. May the memories of those we honor today be blessed and a guiding light for all of us. I want to also thank the History Centre and staff for actually arranging this, and they've done it really nicely. They've displayed all that. So we thank you very much for your efforts, and hope that one day we can probably do the same thing again in the future. Please do remain here. There is some refreshments in the centre. So thank you very much.